Hello, and welcome to the Mr. Monster YouTube channel. I'm Mr. Monster. Please note, all stories set on this channel are created and or written by me. Please enjoy. Today's story is Mountaintop Removal. Matt was a younger guy, about 25. Often floating from job to job, he never really seemed to find his passion. One point he was a mechanic, at another point he was an HVAC apprentice, but he never really found something that he really meshed with. Oftentimes, Matt would just go for whatever made him the most money. This floater mentality often led him to losing relationships. His most recent relationship with Sarah fell apart because he simply couldn't afford to pay for basic necessities and was living off of her funds for a while. She eventually got upset and left him, and so Matt started to live on his own again and was looking for work. One day, Matt got a new job. His new job was to work as a miner for coal mining. Except this wasn't your standard coal mining where you'd go down a tunnel under a mountain. This coal mining was mountaintop removal. Mountaintop removal often destroyed the natural beauty of the mountain, but made the companies a lot of profit. Also, typically had a bit less risk than underground coal mining. It typically worked by exploding the top of the mountain and stripping it away layer by layer. The first day Matt went in, he remembered that the guys weren't so nice to him, often giving him shit and calling him names, as they seemed to do with all of the newbies, he later learned. The one guy he really didn't like, however, was the foreman. Not because the foreman was especially mean, but he seemed especially greedy, hungry for power. This concerned Matt, but what are you going to do? Most people in mid-management positions are going to be that way as it is, he supposed. Many months went on, and he eventually started working some of the heavy machinery for mountaintop removal, often scraping away the layers of soil, trying to get to more hard rock, and then helping to remove the rocks, break them up, and work to get underneath so that they could get to a layer of coal. Matt wasn't necessarily the strongest environmentalist. He didn't love the idea of burning coal all the time, but he also kind of figured there wasn't much he could do. Living in West Virginia, it wasn't like he had a whole lot of options. Biggest industry in the area was coal mining itself, and he supposed working out in the sunlight was a lot more fun than working underground all day. One day, however, there was an accident. The company had decided to use some old explosives instead of the more recently developed explosives that could be detonated from a distance. The foreman had told the employees that he would pay double to anybody who was willing to run up and light the dynamite and run away. Matt, who was obviously starving for money, his apartment was starting to fall apart from the repairs that it needed, decided that he was going to take on this task. When he ran up to light the dynamite, he saw that it had been layered out in a very wide area, and the fuse that he was given was not as long as he would have liked. He took out his lighter from his pocket and flicked it up, and he often thought about how nice it would be to get a pack of cigarettes to light with that lighter, but never wanted to ruin his lungs that much. He lit it. The fuse began to strip away like a tide receding. For a second, Matt actually froze before he thought better of it and started moving. He sprinted as hard as he could away from it, hoping that his hard hat would do something to protect his head if the explosion didn't go as planned. The fuse went faster than expected, and he heard the explosions behind him as he pounded each step forward. Next to him, he saw a huge boulder land, creating a crater in the ground. He panicked and started to run as fast as he could. There seemed to be a little boost of energy from the adrenaline pushing him harder and harder. Eventually, he was able to make it back to the entire crew, or at least what he thought was the entire crew. They later found out that there was an accident and one of the members had been eating lunch too close to the explosion area. He was killed in the incident. However, the man had no family, and like a lot of the workers, kind of seemed to be a lost soul, so there was no lawsuit waiting to happen. The company seemed to bury it and tried to erase the records that the man exists. Or at least that's what Matt presumed, because when he asked the foreman about the incident, the foreman acted as if he had no idea what he meant. As time went on, scraping away to get more and more deep into the layers of the mountain, weird instances kept happening. One day, they came to work, and Matt noticed his buddy Mark wasn't there. Mark was actually one of the younger guys, about 35, and he liked to talk to him. And he asked everybody about it, and no one had any idea where he went. They just presumed he up and quit, often as this job would entail. As time went on, however, more and more men seemed to stop coming to work. It got so bad that the foreman started telling everybody to try and promote the job, saying he would offer more pay to anybody who got another person hired. No one seemed to come through, but at a certain point, everybody started to wonder if there was something wrong with the operation itself. Why were so many men quitting? Eventually, it came down to there only being about 20 men left, Matt being one of them. Matt considered leaving the position as he always did, but the pay was just too good. And eventually the foreman actually raised everyone's rates. They had an excess of funds because of all the people who kept quitting. And one day, a strange series of events occurred. This day Matt will never forget. And in fact, it's etched into his memory like a chisel in stone. It was the day the creature appeared. Matt was working one of the bigger backhoe machines, and he heard a noise. He looked to the side of the mountain and saw a very bizarre creature. The creature had no head, no tail, no sign of a front or back. It simply had 4 legs and a body. It was hairy and had long talons. He didn't know what to make of it. For a second, he thought he was hallucinating. Maybe something had gotten into his drinking water. But as soon as he saw it, the creature disappeared. Later that day, he heard trees being taken down and presumed that the logging company that had been fighting for a permit finally won it. But as time went on, he noticed that the sound was getting closer and closer and closer, coming up the mountain, until eventually the sound stopped. Matt, being concerned about the noise, or lack thereof, looked around, trying to see if he could piece the monster out from the area. He presumed that maybe the monster was actually the thing that was destroying the trees. When he looked, he saw that the monster had blood all over its body, and it ran down into the strip mining area. It started destroying machines, tossing them to the side, smashing them into the rocks. Then he saw the monster grab one of his friends, Jeremy, lifting it up with one of its feet that looked more like a hand in this light, and it crushed him in between its claws. Whatever this creature was, it was mad, and it was rampaging. The foreman came out and started screaming for everyone to get out of there. Matt didn't have a whole lot of time to react, so he simply jumped out of the backhoe and tried to run for the nearest building. Although he figured it wouldn't be much help at preventing the monster from getting to him, because he had just seen the monster launch a bulldozer over the side of the mountain. The monster was enormous, standing at least 50 feet tall. He was horrified at what it was doing, and noticed that it wasn't actually consuming any of the people that it was destroying. It was simply killing for killing's sake. Or at least that's what he had thought. The chaos reigned, and as time rolled on, eventually the screaming stopped. Matt looked out from the bathroom of the interior of the foreman's trailer, and saw that the creature was just standing there. He would have presumed it was looking around, but he saw no eyes, no thing that should be utilized for sight or sensation of other creatures. But then somehow he noticed that the monster fixed on him. He froze and ducked back underneath the window, but it was too late. The monster was running over towards the trailer, flipping it end over end over end, and eventually it went off the side of the mountain, rolling down. Matt was helpless. He flung and bounced from side to side, and eventually smashed his head so hard that he went unconscious. In the following weeks, Matt woke up in the hospital. He asked the nurse and all the doctors where he had come from and what had happened, and they just repeated that there was some sort of accident at the top of the mountaintop removal. According to them, an explosive had got off and destroyed everything that was around him. When he tried to tell his portion of the story, they simply took it as it was and presumed that he was making it up, or rather, his mind was fabricating a story that he could comprehend, something that would make it more palatable for him, knowing that all of his friends and coworkers had just died. There was one other person who escaped, however, and surprisingly, it was the foreman. When he went to the foreman, he tried to ask everything he could about the situation, and eventually he got the answer that the monster was the reason the crew kept getting smaller and smaller. The foreman was a superstitious man, and he believed that the monster itself was the spirit or protector of the mountain. He had heard similar stories from other mountaintop removal crews, but often dismissed them, not because he didn't believe them, but because he never thought it would happen to him. Months later, Matt returned to the scene of the accident. He walked up the mountain from the road and looked out to see what became of the area that had been rampaged by the monster. And to his surprise, it was completely overgrown. Some of the trees that were from the side of the mountain appeared to have been transplanted on the top. Now, it wasn't back to its original shape or form, but it was a whole lot better than how it had looked when they were stripping it for coal. Matt found what extra funds he had, gathered them, and decided to sue the company to try and get damages for his pain and suffering. He eventually won enough money that would last him probably about 20 years if he lived meagerly. He knew it wouldn't last him the rest of his life, but it was a start, and it was going to help him on this road to recovery from the incident. The massive brain trauma he had sustained was going to definitely play a role in his life from that point on. But the one thing that struck him as odd was that he had to sign a non-disclosure agreement in order to get the settlement. Whenever he looked at newspapers or other news outlets to try and see if anybody knew the truth, there was never anything about what had truly happened. They all claimed it was simply an explosive accident. Matt knew this wasn't the truth, but if he negated the non-disclosure agreement, he would not only be sued to oblivion, but he would lose a lot of the money he was using to cover his medical expenses. And he couldn't afford to tarnish his reputation as well as lose all of his money. Eventually, the coal miner company had won. They made everybody who was aware of the incidents sign non-disclosure agreements, including the foreman, and no one ever really found out the truth of the mountain, nor the monster that lurked there. Matt knew, though, and Matt would always know. I hope you guys enjoyed this story of mountaintop removal. It's something that I whipped up rather quickly and a new format that I'm trying to stylize for my channel. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like. And if you guys have any ideas on ways that I could improve my ad-lib stories, I would really appreciate hearing them in the comments. Please remember to also subscribe and click that notification bell for more videos in the future. And as always, I hope you guys have a great day. I'm Mr. Monster, and I am out.